Welcome to Healing Wisdom, a Thursday morning talk show featuring guests sharing their stories and knowledge. We discuss the healing aspects of the arts, metaphysics, social justice, and adventure through all types of terrain. So join me, Pandora Peoples, here on WOMR 92.1 FM in Provincetown and WFMR 91.3 FM in Orleans. We're streaming worldwide at WOMR.org. Our theme music is provided by Mason. You can find her website at masonmusic.com. That's MAESYN. My guest today is blues musician James Montgomery, who's performed countless times with friends Buddy Guy, James Cotton, Junior Wells, and John Lee Hooker, as well as with the Beatles and the Ramones and Leonard Skinner, and so many other musicians. Welcome, James. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Well, thanks for having me. I appreciate being on your show, and it's wonderful. Yeah, I have played with an awful lot of people now that I think about it.
So you're going to be in Truro at Payomet on November 5th, and then you're going to also be at the Music Room on the 6th, and you're going to have a harmonica summit there at the Music Room. There's going to be a 5 o'clock workshop, and then you're going to perform at 7 o'clock, yeah?
Yeah, I remember the first gig I played on the Cape, I think in 1971, whatever it is. I first got to Boston University, I was, you got to go down the Cape, And Cape Cod is an easy place to fall in love with. It's just so great. And over the years, since our first show there in 1971, we played there hundreds of times. The Cape Cod Coliseum used to be a place where we played. But so we love the Cape. Payomet is one of our favorite places to play because it's big and the crowd's crazy. And we always play a real high energy show there. And so we have a ball there, and then, the Music Room, we opened that room up a couple of years ago. Some friends of ours built it, and it's a really music-friendly room. They built it with the idea of bringing in national acts. They have a studio built into the place, and a wine bar and an art gallery. It's kind of a multi-purpose place, and that one's very intimate. There's only 84 tickets, I think, there, so you better buy them now. And that one, we're bringing in Harper, the incredible Australian harmonica player, and Cheryl Arena, who's also not only a terrific harmonica player, but she teaches harmonica camps down in Clarksdale, Mississippi, the home of the blues, where Robert Johnson and Charlie Patton and all those guys who played, actually kind of invented the form of Delta blues right around in that whole area. So she teaches down there. So it's going to be a couple of fun-filled nights on the Cape, at Payomet and Truro, and then West Yarmouth at the Music Room. And the gig at Payomet, I'm bringing a drummer who played with the Jay Giles Band for 5 years, and a bass player who's done 4 tours as Aerosmith's bass player. Guitar player who's actually played with Belushi and Aykroyd in the Blues Brothers, and a saxophone player from the Beach Boys. So it's going to be an intense lineup.
Very, very cool. So you've known Buddy Guy since you were 16, and you'd sometimes put the band up when they needed a place to stay.
We had a band house in East Cambridge. So when Buddy and Junior would come to town, because I knew Junior better than I knew Buddy back in those days, because I met him when I was a kid in Detroit, and tried to get him to teach me how to play harmonica and stuff. So every once in a while, Phil Guy, Buddy's brother, was in the band back then. So every once in a while, they would just come over to the band house and just kind of end up staying there, so they didn't have to get hotels. Of course, Buddy and Junior always had hotels, but they put the band up occasionally with us. And there was one night, I don't know how this transpired, but there was one night Junior Wells and I nailed a bologna sandwich to the wall of the band house. And when we moved out 2 years later, the bologna sandwich looked exactly like it did when we nailed it up there. So I was wondering how many preservatives were in that thing. But anyway, that was kind of a wild and crazy house. And then we moved from there to a band house out in Hingham. And at that house, Bonnie Raitt would spend the night, and the Chambers brothers would spend the night. And that all-girl group, Fanny, with the Millington sisters and one of the Quattro sisters, they would stay up on the third floor. And Link Ray spent a night there. That band house was actually pretty dangerous. Eventually, got a picture on the wall. Well, I got a million pictures on the wall. Eventually, Buddy Guy would sometimes use us as his backup band when he came to town, so he could save money on hotels and transportation and everything. My best friends from those days were Junior Wells, John Lee Hooker, and James Cotton. But James Cotton and I became very, very close. And toward the end of his life, he called me son and I called him dad. Jacqueline, his manager wife, would answer and say, "Oh, your father wants to say hello." And he'd put James on it.
Blues with the feeling, that's what I have today. With the feeling, that's what I have today. I got to find my baby, if it takes all night and day. What a lonesome feeling when you're by yourself. When you're by yourself, and the one that you're loving has gone off with someone else.
I just finished touring the month of October with a documentary made about James Cotton, Bonnie Blue, James Cotton's life in the blues. We came in second place nationally for the Library of Congress Ken Burns Prize for Film. So I just got back from the Library of Congress, where I was sitting like right next to Ken Burns and at an award ceremony for the film that we made. And then the week before that, we were in Mill Valley with the film, where we had 2 screenings, which was great. And then the week before that, we finished in second place at the International Black Film Festival. And they screened us down there at the National Museum of African American Music in Nashville. So the James Cotton film is doing really well. We just got 3 offers for distribution and all that stuff. So he was still alive when we started the film. And so, it was really a labor of love for us. And I did it in conjunction with the Woods Hole Film Festival out of Woods Hole in Falmouth with Judy Lasser, who's the director of the Woods Hole Film Festival for over 30 years now. So
that's really exciting. Yeah.
And the words decided by Williamson, don't start me talking, I'll tell everything I know. And I do have another documentary I produced about my younger brother, Jeff, who was a gay activist and a warrior in the gay movement.
You're the founding executive director of Triangle Foundation.
Yeah, wow, good for you. Yeah, wow, you know your stuff here. Yeah, because he was so effective at being a gay activist that he ended up on the Aryan Nation hit list. And one time they came into his office with guns blazing, shooting, and his partner got shot in the chest. And they sawed the wheel off of his car one time. So when he hit 60, the wheel came off. And so, they were out to get him because in those days when you worked to get rights for gay people, people wanted to kill you. They literally wanted to kill you for trying to get rights for the LGBTQ movement. So and I'm going to cry, but it's a pretty moving movie about my brother Jeff, he's basically responsible for hate crime legislation.
I saw the trailer for it. It's amazing. It's America, You Kill Me. He just was all over the media. He's very passionate, and his partner, when he was killed outside of a club, it just changed his life, and he wanted to advocate for gay rights. And then it's hate crimes prevention, and then it just escalated because he saw the need for so much more advocacy.
I'm so impressed with the homework that you've done here. Yeah, I kind of figured out that he was gay when he was about maybe 10 or 12 years old. I just kind of kept it to myself. I didn't say anything, and I just wanted to see how things evolved. And in those days, if you outed somebody who wasn't ready to come out or wasn't really, it was a whole different procedure back then. My brother says the most important thing you can do is come out. But in those days, it was a very tricky maneuver, So his first boyfriend ever got shot and killed outside of a gay bar. And when he called the police, they said, well, we're not going to investigate. And Jeff said, well, why would that be? They said, well, it's just another gay killing and we don't have the resources. So, and it was his first boyfriend ever. And he tried to, where can I go to get somebody to help here? And there was nobody. So he started the organization himself.
Yeah. So what was the focus of his life before that?
Another thing that he's single-handedly responsible for, although he had a really big team, but he restored an orchestra hall, which was an acoustically perfect hall in Detroit that literally the wrecking ball was due to raise it the next day. But just under the wire, they finished raising enough money to go forward with the project. And it's just a gorgeous theater. And of course, the Detroit Symphony, who was not helpful at all restoring it, as soon as it restored, they moved in and kicked him out. But it was a gorgeous place. It's one of 8 halls designed by this guy. There were only 2 in America and like 6 in Europe. And one was the Chicago Theater, where I played with George Carlin and Jackson Browne and Bonnie Raitt, all different shows. But first time I played there was with John McLaughlin, the Mahavishnu Orchestra. The band was falling apart and they were at odds. So it was acoustically perfect. And the sound guy took me all the way to the very back of the theater. And there was a sign there. The people on stage looked like ants and said, please be quiet due to perfect acoustic. They didn't even want you talking in the farthest seat away from the stage. So McLaughlin gets out for his moment of silence, and Jerry, the violin player, taps down a can of Budweiser, and you can hear it all over the theater. Well, John McLaughlin's asking for a moment of silence for his guru, Sri Chinmoy. And then you can hear him, you can hear the beer can come open. You can actually hear him gulping the beer down. Anyway, don't get me started. But anyway, that's how acoustically perfect the theater was. Jeff restored a theater, which actually led to the revitalization of 10 or 12 of the most iconic buildings in Detroit got revitalized because of him.
Your brother John was the vice president of Sire Records, and you hosted every record release party for the Ramones in Boston.
Yeah.
That's pretty amazing, too.
When he was at Warner Brothers, he promoted Bonnie, and then he promoted Rod Stewart. But he was so good that when George Harrison, a Beatle, signed his Dark Horse label to Warner Brothers, they looked through all the ranks of Warner Brothers to see who they should put out with George Harrison, and they picked my brother John. So he went around the country with George Harrison trying to promote Cracker Box Palace. So I got to spend 3 days with George Harrison, and I studied Hinduism and studied under Swami Sarvagatananda. So we didn't talk about music. We talked about Indian philosophy and the Rig Vedas and all that stuff.
Hey out there, if you're just joining us, you're listening to Healing Wisdom on WOMR. I'm Pandora Peoples. My guest today is James Montgomery. And the pledge drive is starting tomorrow, but I'd love to invite you to pledge early. We could use some sustaining members here. Feel free to give us a call, 508-487-2619, 1-800-921-WOMR. If you like what you hear, you love the blues, you love blues musicians, we've been speaking with a lot of them here on Healing Wisdom, so any pledge is great. The sustaining membership is only $15 a month, and you can have your name read to support this hour of community radio.
Then he ended up as vice president of Sire Records. And his bands there were the Ramones, the Talking Heads, the Dead Boys, and the Pretenders. So he did a pretty good job. And so all the Ramones record release parties happened in my apartment in Boston. And now that I think about it, Sire Records, I think, still owes me $250 for that last cheese platter and the jugs of wine that I spent for that party. But anyway, and the Ramones were supposed to sing background on my Duck Fever record, but they ended up recording at the same time as us, and our engineer was their producer. So I don't know how he ever got any sleep. That's Stacy, and he was considered the fifth Ramone because he played all the leads because Johnny Ramone couldn't really play lead guitar. So Ed did all the leads on the records. So he would leave our session at like 11 o'clock. The Ramones didn't want to record until 2 in the morning. He would leave our session around 11 or 12, and I don't know, maybe get an hour's worth of sleep and then go and start producing the Ramones. So we ended up with the Dead Boys singing backgrounds instead of the Ramones. We had Steve Baders and Jimmy Zero. And it turned out they really couldn't sing. I mean, they literally couldn't sing, even though Jimmy Zero was the lead singer of the band. But they could go like this. They could go, dit. So that's what we got from them. And we did kind of a version of the Kinks' Who'll Be the Next in Line. As soon as the Cars told me they loved it, I understood why, because it sounded like they arranged it.
You also were in the Paul Butterfield story, the documentary, Horn from the Heart. He's someone who inspired you a lot, right? As a harmonica harp player?
He was a huge influence on me. Matter of fact, I've modeled all of my live bands, every band I've had. In my first band, I think I was 16 in Detroit. I modeled all of my live performances after Paul Butterfield and James Cotton. And so he was a huge influence on me. And when I got to know him, I just, it was a thrill for me to hang with him. You know, he was such a high energy performer. And in that documentary, I'm in it with Bonnie Raitt and Maria Muldaur, Jeff Muldaur, David Sanborn. It's a great movie about Paul. You know, it's called Horn from the Heart because the harmonica is really the most intimate instrument, because to get a sound out of the harmonica, you have to put your body in the exact same position you would put it in if you were speaking. If I want to bend a note, I go, and if I want to bend a note on the harmonica, So it's the exact same thing, except the reed in the harmonica becomes your vocal cord. So it's that intimate that you're literally using it as your vocal cord. And the other thing is you can't see it when you play. So it's just all about total feeling. You can't look down and see what your finger position is or any of that stuff. You know, I had met Paul briefly when I was a teenager, but then in my college band, my first college band, we ended up going to Rochester, New York and opening up for Buddy Guy, Junior Wells, and the Paul Butterfield band. You know, it was a college gig, so they put all the band members up in dormitory rooms, but the band leaders, which would have been me, Paul, Buddy, and Junior, they put us up in the Victorian. So I run back to the Victorian thinking, oh, this would be great hanging out with Paul and Buddy and Junior. And of course, they went out and partied all night, and they came in probably around 12 o'clock. They had a bottle of Courvoisier for Buddy and a bottle of Johnny Walker Black for Junior and a case of Michelob for me and Paul. So we started drinking and fooling around, and Paul says, hey, let's play. So Paul went over to the piano, and Buddy got out his guitar. And so I ended up jamming with Paul, Buddy, and Junior. You know, at this point, I'm 18 years old in college, and we jammed almost all night. And I was supposed to go back to Boston that night and take an exam the following day. And I told my professor why I wasn't able to make it, and he thought that was a great reason to not make an exam. He says, wow, that sounds great. Take the exam tomorrow.
Well, that's awesome that you got sympathy.
Yeah. And then when I was at the Caldwell Winfield band based out of Woodstock, and that band actually became the band that played on Van Morrison's Moondance record. And Van lived in Cambridge for a while. I knew him back in the late 60s when he was in Cambridge. But anyway, so on the Caldwell Winfield band, on the way home from the show, we'd stop by Deanie's, and if Paul was there, I'd kind of saddle up next to him and have some Michelobs and chat. And then if he wasn't there, we would stop by Levon Helms on the way home, because he had this big jam session, and that was, I'm talking late 60s, early 70s, maybe even 69. But Levon was a great guy. I ended up recording with him down in Nashville, here again with Buddy and Junior, and Chris Seal from the Uptown Horns. We made a commercial for Dodge, and then I ended up in a TV commercial that ran during all these sporting events. So it was great.
What do you think it was that propelled you and pushed you forward? You're a spiritual guy. You studied Hinduism. How do you see the right use of will? And how do you see your own personal magic in terms of collaborating with all these guys and finding your path so early?
You know, I had a radio show for about 5 years. And over the course of that period, we did about 100 interviews. Some of them were repeats, but it's safe to say I've interviewed at least 75 or 80 blues musicians, maybe more. And I remember I had a moment when I heard blues harmonica for the first time. It struck a deep chord with me. And I was a big rock and roll fan, but when I heard live blues and live blues harmonica, I just went, wow, man, that is... And every blues musician, Bonnie Raitt, Dr. John, John Lee Hooker, James Cotton, they all Koko Taylor, they all told me the moment. And I didn't even have to start it at first, but eventually I realized after 30 of these musicians told me that they had a moment. Then I started just asking people, did you have a moment? And they all did. And so that, once that happens to you and you really want to dedicate your life to playing blues music, that's what keeps you going. I mean, because you share that moment time and time again in your life, every time I'm on stage, and that's, I don't know, 30,000 times by night. And when I look at our early tour dates, touring with the Allman Brothers and Lynyrd Skynyrd, Steve Miller, Humble Pie, all those guys, if there were 30 dates in a month, we worked 23 or 24 of them. And that went on for 10 years. So there's 3,000 right there, So even the thousands of times that I've been on stage, you still relive that moment every time you're up there. And so that's what I think keeps us going is, I'm sure it happens with other genres too, but I know for blues musicians, being able to not only experience that moment, but share it with your bandmates and share it with the audience. On a really good night, you basically disappear and the music plays you. And I know that's true because years ago I had a cassette tape of a show that we did, and I was listening to it and I heard this harmonica solo. I said, wow, that might be the best harmonica solo you've ever played. So I kept rewinding the tape and rewinding the tape and I for about 2 hours, I tried to learn that solo and I just couldn't. I could not figure out. I had no idea how I played it. I couldn't learn it. And I just finally said, well, I guess I'm never going to learn that one. So music literally plays you when you're doing it right.
I got a mind to give up living and go shopping instead.
Hey, I just want to remind our listeners that you're listening to Outermost Radio, WOMR. This is Healing Wisdom. I'm Pandora, and my guest today is musician James Montgomery. The pledge drive officially starts tomorrow, but it's not too soon to pledge towards this show and this hour of programming. I've been producing this show for 9 years. I've spoken with many musicians and authors. Recently, the Yardbirds' Jim McCarty, Canned Heat's drummer Faito de la Parra, Harper of Harper and the Midwest Kind, a Mongolian throat singer, a West African musician who plays the kora, Josiah Longo of the Slambovian Circus of Dreams, and so many more. I've put in many hours researching, communicating with publicists, finding guests. Your feedback has been wonderful. It would mean a lot to me if you could make a donation today towards sustaining this show. For those who can afford it, a sustaining membership of $15 a month gets your name read every week on this hour. If you're not already a member of our station and you'd like to make a $5 monthly donation to become an individual member, you can pledge in the name of the blues today, pledge in the name of Healing Wisdom. You can pledge online at WOMR.org or give us a call, 508-487-2619. What's your perspective on great musicians and how do people connect with the audience? And is it necessary to connect with an audience to be a great musician?
Well, in almost all of the major spiritual paths or whatever, including Native Americans and Wiccans and including the Hindu trilogy, their version of the Father, Son, and Holy Ghost, and then Christianity. There's a poem that starts, "Oh God, Creator and Preserver of the universe." So the creative principle exists in every single spiritual aspect. So if all these great self-realized people have understood that there's a thing that is a creative principle that permeates the universe, then I'm thinking there probably is a creative principle that permeates the universe. And I think as musicians, as songwriters, as painters, as artists, even Einstein, plugged into what he called the creative principle, as a physicist. So, I mean, it can happen in different walks of life. It doesn't have to be music, but definitely for musicians, that's where we go. We go to this creative principle that permeates everything. It permeates our bodies, our souls. It permeates this laptop that I'm looking at. The yogis say that the molecules and atoms that bond together, it's not random. It's the will of the universe that molecules and atoms function the way they do to create matter. It's willful. So there's consciousness in the table, and there's consciousness in my laptop. And part of that consciousness contains the creative principle. So it really flows through everything, even inanimate objects. And that's what we connect to. It's one of the most beautiful things that humans can do is connect to that creative principle. And especially collaborating with band members or sharing with an audience, it makes it all that more spectacular, and that's my Detroit accent, spectacular. So that's where we go, and that's where songwriters go, and that's where poets go, and that's where great saints go.
Well, thank you so much, James Montgomery, for speaking with us on Healing Wisdom on WOMR.
Well, I thought we were just getting started.
Yes, the creative principle. Everything vibrates. The whole universe vibrates, and everything vibrates.
That's it. String theory.
Thank you so much, James Montgomery, for joining us today. Folks can find you this November 5th at Payamet Performing Arts Center, and then also on the 6th at the Music Room and the workshop.
Big harmonica summit too, and the workshop too at 5:00. If you're a harmonica player on the Cape, you got to get down there because Cheryl Arena will run it down. She'll show you how to play the damn thing.
Very exciting. Very exciting. Yeah. I have some memories because my dad loved playing the harmonica and he loved tap dancing at the same time. And so my early.
Oh, wow. Tap dancing and playing at the same time?
Yeah.
Why didn't you tell me? Now that it's almost too late for me to learn how to tap dance, you tell me that.
For those of us who are harmonica shy but really have always wanted to play it, any words of support? Can we still go even if we don't really know how to play it?
Oh yeah. No. And the other thing is, when I saw this guy play blues harmonica, Chris Cio, by the way, who's we still play together to this day because he's in the Uptown Horns. And it turns out that my James Cotton film is showing in London next week, and he made a film about Willie DeVille that's showing in London at the same festival. So, I mean, who would have guessed that two guys who are playing Little League Baseball together in 6th grade would end up, both of us, with a film in London at a documentary opening. So when I saw him, I wanted to join the jug band, So, and the quickest way up there was to play harmonica because, to play guitar well enough to be in a band, you got to play for a few years. But to play harmonica well enough to be in a band, I'm not saying that you're going to be great, but good enough to play in a band, 6-7 months, you're up there. So if you want to learn the harmonica, come down, listen to Cheryl, and 6 months later, you'll be in a band.
Awesome. Rock on, James. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. And I loved having you on, and you did incredible homework. It was great to talk to you.
Great to talk with you.
Okay. Namaste.
Namaste. You've been listening to Healing Wisdom at Outermost Radio. All of our shows are podcasts at WOMR.org. Also check out healingwisdomradioshow.com and contact me at pandora@WOMR.org.